My sister is marrying my cheating ex, and my parents threatened to cut my college fund if I didn't attend. Hey everyone! I spend so much time finding these stories for you. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button. It means the world and helps keep this journey going strong. Let's grow together. Now, let's start the video. OP starts by saying, Alright, so, I 28 female used to think I had my life together. I was engaged to Mike 30 million, my boyfriend of 5 years. We weren't a perfect couple or anything, but I really thought we were solid. I mean, we'd been together so long, and we had this whole future planned out. It wasn't like a dream relationship, but it was ours, you know? We'd been engaged for 2 years and had started planning this sweet summer wedding. Nothing fancy or expensive, just something simple with our closest friends and family. I spent hours picking out flowers, researching venues, and pinning wedding dresses on Pinterest. Mike wasn't super involved, but I just thought, typical guy stuff. He'd roll his eyes at centerpieces and say, just tell me where to stand and what to wear. That should have been a red flag, but I was too busy being in love to notice. Everything seemed fine. Well, as fine as it can be when you're juggling wedding planning, work, and life. I was stressed, but excited. Then, out of nowhere, 3 months before the wedding, my entire world came crashing down. One day, I get this DM from a mutual friend. We weren't super close, but she was someone I trusted. Her message said, Hey, I don't know if I should be telling you this, but I think you need to know. Attached were screenshots of Mike flirting with another woman. It wasn't just casual banter either, it was straight up romantic. I remember staring at my phone, frozen. I just kept thinking, this has to be a mistake. But the screenshots didn't lie. The texts were unmistakable. Mike wasn't just flirting, he was cheating. And it wasn't some random one-night stand. This was someone he'd been talking to for months. Months of planning our wedding while sneaking around with another woman. At first, I didn't confront him. I needed time to process. Was I too boring? Did I miss some giant red flag? Was I not enough for him? The next day, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I showed Mike the screenshots and asked him to explain himself. At first, he denied it, saying it was just harmless fun and that it didn't mean anything. But when I pressed him, he finally admitted it. He said, It's not what you think. We didn't do anything. Oh, because emotional cheating is so much better? I was furious. I told him to pack his stuff and leave. He begged me to forgive him, saying he'd do anything to fix this. But there was nothing to fix. How do you come back from that? How do you trust someone again after they've shattered your heart into a million pieces? Calling off the wedding was humiliating. I had to contact everyone and explain that it wasn't happening anymore. The pitying looks, the awkward conversations, it was unbearable. But at least I thought I could move on. Mike left town shortly after, and I figured that was the end of it. What I didn't know was that this was just the beginning. The real betrayal? That was yet to come. And it wasn't from Mike. A year after the breakup, I was finally starting to feel like myself again. Healing wasn't a straight line. It was a mess of good days and soul-crushing ones. But I was holding it together. My best friend Jake, a 29 male, made sure of that. He wasn't the kind of guy to let me wallow. Whenever I'd spiral into what-ifs or start blaming myself for Mike's infidelity, Jake would shut it down with a well-timed fuck that guy or a hilarious distraction. So when my younger sister Lily, a 25 female, called that afternoon, I didn't think much of it. She sounded bubbly, too bubbly, like she'd just won a game show. Big news! Dinner at Mom and Dad's tonight, okay? You're gonna love it. I wasn't super close to Lily, but she had her moments. I figured she'd landed a promotion or was finally dating someone who wasn't a walking red flag. Fine, I thought. One family dinner won't kill me. When I pulled up to my parents' house, I immediately felt like something was off. My mom opened the door with a smile that looked like it had been glued on. Hey, sweetheart, she said, pulling me into a stiff hug. My dad waved from his usual spot on the couch, half ignoring me as he sipped his drink. Classic dad. But it was Lily who really set me on edge. She was practically vibrating with excitement, her grin so wide it made my stomach turn. Wow, you're in a good mood, I said cautiously as I slipped off my coat. Lily just giggled, brushing past me. You'll see, she said, her tone so sappy it made my teeth ache. Wes sat down for dinner, and at first it was business as usual. My mom rattled on about her garden, my dad grunted approval every so often, and Lily kept sneaking glances at me like she was sitting on a secret. I tried to ignore it, focusing on my plate, but then Lily stood up and tapped her glass with a fork. I have an announcement, she said, her voice trembling with excitement. Here we go. She took a deep breath, and I braced myself for something dumb, like her adopting another rescue hamster, or landing a spot in some overpriced yoga retreat. But then she said it. I'm engaged. The table erupted into congratulations, and I clapped along, forcing a smile. Wow, that's amazing. Who's the lucky guy? Lily beamed at me, her eyes locking onto mine like a predator zeroing in on prey. Mike, she said, her voice dripping with pride. The air left the room. I blinked, sure I'd misheard her. Mike? I repeated, the name tasting bitter in my mouth. Yeah, Mike. We've been seeing each other for a while now. He proposed last week. My chest tightened as her words sank in. My ex-fiancé. The man who cheated on me. The man I'd spent the last year trying to forget. And now, my sister's fiancé. The room spun. My parents sat there, watching me carefully, their faces tight with uncomfortable smiles. They knew. How long? I croaked. Lily's grin faltered for a second, but she quickly recovered, shrugging nonchalantly. A while. We got close after, you two broke up. It just happened. It just happened. Like accidentally spilling coffee or missing a turn on the highway. You're joking, I said, my voice shaking. You're telling me you've been sneaking around with my ex and now you expect me to what? Celebrate this? My mom jumped in calm. Sweetheart, we didn't want to tell you right away. We knew it would be hard for you to hear. Hard for me to hear? I repeated, my voice rising. You knew about this, and you didn't think to warn me? You just sprung it on me over mashed potatoes? Lily reached out. I know it's a lot, but Mike and I are in love. I really hope you can understand. My vision blurred with tears as I stood up, my chair screeching against the hardwood floor. You're disgusting, all of you. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. Now wait a minute, my dad started, but I was already grabbing my bag and heading for the door. I slammed it behind me, the sound echoing in the chilly night air. My hands shook as I climbed into my car. The tears came fast and hot, blurring the streetlights as I sped away. When I got home, I collapsed onto my couch and called Jake. He picked up on the second ring. I tried to explain, but the words came out in choked bursts. Lily, engaged. Mike, wait, Jake said, his tone sharpening. You're Mike. The Mike? Yes! I sobbed, the anger and disbelief pouring out of me. She's marrying him, Jake. And my parents just sat there like it was totally normal. He said, What the actual fuck? I let out a bitter laugh, wiping my face. They think I'm supposed to just be okay with it, like I'm supposed to smile and clap and go to the effing wedding. You don't owe them shit, Jake said firmly. If they think you're gonna roll over for this, they don't know you. He was right. They didn't know me, but they were about to find out. After that nightmare dinner, things only got worse. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts, calls, voicemails. Lily kept sending me these long, rambling messages about how she never wanted to hurt me and how their relationship was unexpected but real. My parents were no better. They tried to guilt trip me, saying I was being selfish and immature for not supporting Lily's happiness. They kept saying things like, love is complicated, and you can't control who you fall in love with. It was disgusting. I ignored them for a while, but one evening my dad called me and said, if you don't come to the wedding, I'll have to reconsider helping with your grad school. That's when it clicked. They weren't just pressuring me to attend. They were trying to control me. I remember sitting there, feeling my blood boil. Grad school was my dream, and I'd worked so hard to get where I was. But now, they were using it as leverage to force me to accept something I couldn't stomach. I felt trapped. That night, I went to Jake's place. He took one look at me and knew something was up. They're not letting it go, are they? He asked, handing me a drink. I told him everything. The endless texts, the guilt tripping, and my dad's ultimatum. Jake listened quietly, shaking his head. When I finished, he leaned back and said, they're pushing you because they think you'll cave. They think you'll put up with their shit because you always have. But you don't have to. I stared at him. What am I supposed to do? If I don't go, they'll cut me off. If I do go, I'm letting them win. He said, you don't have to play by their rules. Go to the wedding, sure. But don't go quietly. If they want you there so badly, make them regret it. At first, I thought he was joking. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. They wanted me to pretend everything was fine, to sit there and smile while they celebrated their betrayal. But I wasn't going to do that. Over the next few days, I started putting together a plan. It wasn't just about ruining the wedding, although, let's be honest, that was part of it. It was about taking back my power. They'd taken so much from me. My trust, my self-worth, my peace of mind. This was my chance to show them I wasn't someone they could walk all over. The first thing I did was go through my old messages and emails. I found everything. Texts between Mike and me during our engagement, screenshots my friend had sent me of his cheating, and even photos from the wedding planning I'd been so excited about. I compiled it all into a little folder. It was painful to look at, but I knew it was necessary. Jake helped me put the finishing touches on my plan. They think this is their big day, he said, smirking. But it's about to be your stage. By the time the wedding rolled around, I wasn't just angry, I was ready. The day of the wedding felt like stepping into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Everything about it screamed a perfect fairy tale. The venue was gorgeous. It looked like something straight out of a wedding magazine. But for me, it was a battlefield. I walked in with Jake by my side. He'd insisted on coming, and thank God he did. "You've got this," he whispered as we made our way through the crowd. "Don't let them see you sweat." I nodded, but my heart was pounding. I wasn't here to celebrate. I was here to take back everything they'd stolen from me. The ceremony itself was excruciating. Watching Lily walk down the aisle, glowing in her white dress, made my stomach churn. She looked radiant, sure, but all I could see was the betrayal. And Mike? He had this smug grin on his face, like he'd won some prize. I couldn't believe I'd ever loved him. The worst part was my parents. They were sitting in the front row, beaming like proud parents at a school play. I caught my mom's eye at one point, and she gave me this little smile as if to say, "See? Everything worked out." It took everything in me not to storm out right then and there. But I didn't. I stayed. I waited. When the ceremony ended, the reception began, and that's when things started to heat up. As the maid of honor, yes, they had the audacity to ask me. I was expected to give a speech. I'd agreed to it, of course. How could I not? But they had no idea what was coming. The room was buzzing with laughter and clinking glasses when I stepped up to the mic. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. Lily was smiling, Mike looked indifferent, and my parents were watching expectantly. I cleared my throat and started with the usual polite fluff. "Hi, everyone," I said, forcing a smile. "For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lily's older sister. I'm so happy to be here today to celebrate this unique love story." There was some polite laughter from the crowd, but I could see Lily's smile falter slightly. Good. I took a deep breath and continued. "You know, weddings are about honesty and commitment. They're about building a foundation of trust and love." I paused, letting the words sink in. "And I think it's important that everyone here knows the truth about the foundation of this particular relationship." The room went silent, dead silent. All eyes were on me. I turned to Lily and Mike, my voice steady but sharp. Mike and I were engaged. We were planning our wedding when I found out he was cheating on me. And do you know who he was cheating with? My sister. The same sister who sat by my side while I cried over him, pretending to be supportive. The crowd erupted into gasps and whispers. Lily's face turned ghost white, and Mike's smug expression disappeared completely. My parents looked like they'd just been slapped. I wasn't done. They didn't start dating after we broke up. No, they were seeing each other while Mike and I were still together. And my parents? They knew. They kept it from me because they thought it would hurt my feelings. Well, guess what? It did. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder I'd prepared. For anyone who's curious, I have the proof right here. Screenshots, texts, and even photos. Feel free to take a look. I handed the folder to a nearby table, knowing it would spread like wildfire. Then I turned back to the mic. So, to Lily and Mike, I wish you all the best. You deserve each other. I put the mic down, grabbed my bag, and walked out. Jake was waiting for me outside. "Holy shit," he said, grinning. "That was epic." I let out a shaky breath, my hands trembling. "Do you think it was too much?" He laughed. "Too much? That was perfect. They wanted you there? Well, you gave them a show." As we walked to the car, I could hear the chaos erupting behind us. Guests were shouting, people were leaving, and I swear I heard Lily crying. But I didn't care. For the first time in over a year, I felt like I could breathe again. Walking out of that wedding was the most liberating moment of my life. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to make everyone happy or swallowing my pain to keep the peace. I left behind the chaos, but I knew it wasn't over. Sure enough, by the time Jake and I were halfway home, my phone was lighting up like a Christmas tree. My parents, Lily, and even some distant relatives were calling and texting nonstop. I ignored them all. Jake looked over at me and said, "You don't owe them an explanation. Let them stew." I nodded. Part of me wanted to read the messages, to see what they were saying, but another part of me just wanted to forget they existed. When I finally checked later that night, the messages were exactly what I expected, equal parts outrage and guilt-tripping. Lily's first text read, "How could you do this to me? You ruined my wedding," followed by, "I'll never forgive you for embarrassing me like that." Mike, surprisingly, stayed silent. I guess he knew better than to reach out. My mom left me a furious voicemail full of disappointment. You crossed the line. This is family. And you embarrassed us all. Don't bother calling until you're ready to apologize. My dad was more direct, texting, You've destroyed this family. Don't expect our support moving forward. I cried that night, not because I regretted what I did, but because I realized how little they cared about me. My parents, my sister, even Mike, they had all betrayed me, and now they were acting like I was the problem. Jake was right. I didn't owe them anything anymore. I don't really feel sorry, and I'm not going to apologize. Update 1. Hey guys, it's been a few months since the wedding, and honestly, wanted to thank all of you for the support and advice. Reading your comments gave me the strength to hold my ground when it felt like my entire family was against me. So, what happened after the wedding? Well, let's just say the aftermess was exactly what you'd expect. Lily went into full victim mode, telling everyone I ruined her special day. She even posted this long, dramatic story on social media about how her jealous sister couldn't let her be happy. But here's the thing. She left out the part where she stole my fiancé and lied to me for months. A few of her friends who were at the wedding reached out to me privately to apologize. They said they had no idea about the backstory and were disgusted by her behavior. Some of them have even cut ties with her. Mike, on the other hand, has been surprisingly quiet. I haven't heard from him directly, but I've heard through the grapevine that his life has taken a hit. The drama from the wedding spread quickly, and it's messed with his professional reputation. He's a real estate agent, and apparently some clients dropped him after finding out about the scandal. Karma works fast, huh? And Lily and Mike's marriage? Let's just say the cracks are already showing. Family members who still talk to me have told me they're constantly fighting. I guess the reality of what they did, and the consequences, is finally sinking in. Honestly, I can't imagine how they're going to make it work when their entire relationship is built on lies and betrayal. Part of me wants to feel bad for Lily, but I can't because she made her choices. As for my parents, they're furious with me. They've made it clear they blame me for the family falling apart. My mom even tried to organize a family meeting to repair the damage, but I refused. I told her I wasn't interested in fixing a relationship with people who supported Lily and Mike while throwing me under the bus. She didn't take it well and called me selfish and immature. Typical. I've gone no contact with Lily and Mike and have drastically reduced my contact with my parents. It's been hard, but honestly, it feels freeing. I spent so much of my life trying to make them happy, trying to be the good daughter, and they repaid me by siding with the people who hurt me the most. I'm done being their doormat. Jake has been my rock through all of this. He's constantly reminding me that I deserve better and helping me focus on my own goals. I've started working a new part-time job to save up for grad school since my parents are no longer supporting me financially. It's been tough, but I'm figuring it out. For the first time, I feel like I'm building a life on my own terms, without anyone else holding me back. Oh, and grad school? It's happening. I've been applying for scholarships and exploring other funding options, and things are looking promising. Looking back, do I regret what I did at the wedding? Not even a little. They wanted me to sit there and celebrate their lies, to pretend everything was okay. But I refused. For once, I stood up for myself, and I'll never apologize for that. If they think I'm the villain, fine. Let me be the villain in their story. At least I'm not the fool anymore. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. It's been a wild few months. Thanks again for all the support. You guys helped me find the strength to reclaim my story, and for that, I'll always be grateful. Final update. Yo everyone, it's update time. You won't believe what happened. Last I told you, my family and Lily were in full meltdown mode after the wedding. Guess whose chaos didn't stop? If you thought Mike's mess ended at I do, think again. This dude's story just keeps getting wilder. So, after the wedding, I didn't hear from Mike directly. No texts, no calls, nothing. At first I thought, maybe he's finally grown a conscience and is staying in his lane. But apparently, that wasn't the case. Turns out, he's been busy doing what he does best, messing things up. About 2 months after the wedding, I got a message from a mutual acquaintance. She said, "You're not going to believe this, but Mike's already back to his old tricks." I didn't even have to ask what she meant. Apparently, Mike has been messaging other women again, and not just casual flirting, full-blown, late-night, inappropriate conversations. The best part? Some of these women are married. Classic Mike. At first I thought, does Lily know? But from what I've gathered, she has no idea. She's still trying to play the role of the doting wife, posting cringy Instagram photos with captions like, "Married to my soulmate." Meanwhile, her soulmate is out here sliding into DMs like it's his full-time job. Things started to unravel even more when I heard through the family grapevine that Lily and Mike have been fighting constantly. Apparently, Mike's behavior at work has been raising eyebrows, too. Remember how I mentioned he's a real estate agent? Well, word got out about the wedding drama. From what I've heard, his boss had to have a serious talk with him about professionalism. Karma, anyone? But here's where it gets even better. One of the women Mike was messaging, she works in the same industry as him, and when she found out he was married, she didn't just block him. She forwarded the screenshots to a few mutual colleagues. Now, people in his professional circle are starting to see the cracks in his charming guy persona. Honestly, I don't feel bad for him. He made his bed, and now he's lying in it. I can't lie, knowing all this gave me a weird sense of satisfaction. Not because I want Lily to be hurt. Okay, maybe a little, but because it proves what I've known all along. Mike hasn't changed and never will. He's the same lying, cheating coward he's always been, and now it's catching up to him. I still haven't reached out to Lily about any of this. Part of me feels like I should. Maybe she deserves to know. But another part of me thinks, this is her problem now. She made her choices, and she's the one who decided to build a life with him, knowing how he treated me. She ignored the red flags, and now she's living in the storm she invited. Do I feel sorry for her? Honestly? Not really. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that people like Mike don't suddenly wake up one day and decide to be decent. They just move on to their next target. Lily thought she was the exception, but as it turns out, she's just another chapter in his story of destruction. As for me, I'm doing better every day. Knowing that Mike is showing his true colors to everyone makes it easier to move on. He's not my problem anymore. If anything, I feel relieved that I dodged a lifetime of this nonsense. Let Lily and Mike deal with the fallout. They deserve each other. Thanks again for all the support, Reddit. You've helped me see things more clearly, and honestly, it's been comforting to know I'm not alone in this. If anything else happens with Mike, and let's be real, it probably will, I'll keep you posted. Until then, I'm going to keep focusing on myself and my future, because I deserve better than the mess I left behind.
I smoothed my apron and took a deep breath, steeling myself for another Sunday dinner with Gloria. The aroma of roast chicken filled the kitchen, but my stomach churned with dread. Emily, dear, are you sure you used enough seasoning? Gloria's syrupy voice drifted in from the dining room. The last time it was so bland. I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to remind her that she'd praised that very same chicken recipe just last month. I'm sure it'll be delicious, Gloria. I called back, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. Aaron appeared in the doorway, his brow furrowed. Need any help, honey? I shook my head, offering a tight smile. I've got it under control. Why don't you keep your mother company? He hesitated, clearly sensing the tension. You know, Mom means well. She just... Aaron! Gloria's voice cut through our conversation like a knife. Come tell me about that big project at work. Emily can manage in the kitchen, I'm sure. I watched my husband's shoulders slump as he turned away, leaving me alone with my simmering resentment. As I carried the platter to the dining room, I caught sight of my reflection in the hall mirror. At 35, I looked older than my years, worry lines etched around my eyes. There she is! Gloria beamed, her perfectly coiffed silver hair gleaming in the soft light. I was beginning to wonder if we'd eat before midnight. I set the platter down, forcing a laugh. Oh, Gloria, you're such a kidder. Aaron cleared his throat. It looks great, Em, doesn't it, Mom? Gloria peered at the chicken, her nose wrinkling slightly. Well, it certainly looks interesting. Did you try that new recipe I sent you? Actually, because I specifically remember telling you how much Aaron loves lemon and rosemary. Didn't I, darling? Aaron shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Mom, Emily's chicken is always delicious. Let's just enjoy the meal, okay? I sat down, my hands shaking slightly as I reached for the serving spoon. The meal progressed with Gloria peppering Aaron with questions about work, barely acknowledging my presence except to make thinly veiled criticisms about the food or the state of the house. You know, Emily, Gloria said, dabbing at her mouth with a napkin, I was talking to my friend Marge the other day. Her daughter-in-law works full-time and still manages to keep a spotless home. I don't know how she does it. I gripped my fork tighter. Well, It's probably because she doesn't have children yet, Gloria continued, her eyes boring into mine. Speaking of which, when are you two planning on giving me some grandchildren? I'm not getting any younger, you know. The room fell silent. I looked to Aaron, silently pleading for support, but he stared down at his plate. We're still discussing it, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Gloria squeaked. Well, don't wait too long. Tick-tock, dear. I abruptly stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Excuse me, I need some air. I fled to the back porch, gulping in the cool evening air. Tears pricked at my eyes as I leaned against the railing, wondering how much longer I could endure this weekly torment. The screen door creaked open behind me. Aaron's voice was soft, hesitant. I turned to face him, no longer able to hide my distress. I can't do this anymore, Aaron. Your mother, she's... I know, he said, running a hand through his hair. She can be a bit much, but she loves us in her own way. I shook my head, frustration bubbling up inside me. Love? Is that what you call it? She criticizes everything I do, makes me feel worthless in my own home. And you just sit there and let it happen. Aaron's face fell. That's not fair, Em. I'm trying to keep the peace. What do you want me to do? Choose between my wife and my mother? The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Before I could respond, Gloria's voice rang out from inside. Aaron? Emily? Where did you two run off to? The dishes won't do themselves, you know. I closed my eyes, feeling the last of my resolve crumble. When I opened them again, I saw the conflict etched on Aaron's face. In that moment, I realized that our marriage had become a battlefield, with Gloria as the opposing general. And I was losing the war. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, but its warmth did nothing to ease the chill that had settled between Aaron and me since last night's disastrous dinner. I mechanically flipped pancakes, my mind racing with unspoken words and simmering frustrations. Aaron shuffled into the kitchen, his tie askew. Morning, Em, he mumbled, reaching for the coffee pot. I turned to face him, spatula in hand. We need to talk about last night. He sighed, shoulders slumping. Can't we just forget about it? Mom didn't mean... The doorbell's shrill ring cut him off. We exchanged puzzled glances before Aaron went to answer it. Mom? I heard him say, surprise evident in his voice. What are you doing here so early? My stomach dropped as Gloria's voice carried through the house. Can't a mother visit her son without an interrogation? I brought breakfast. I gripped the counter, willing myself to stay calm as they entered the kitchen. Gloria breezed past me, setting a bakery box on the table. Oh, Emily, dear, you didn't need to cook. I brought those croissants Aaron loves. She wrinkled her nose at my pancakes. Though I suppose we could have both. Wouldn't want your efforts to go to waste. I plastered on a smile. How thoughtful of you, Gloria. Aaron cleared his throat. Mom, this is unexpected. Emily and I were just about to... Nonsense, Gloria interrupted, waving a manicured hand. I have wonderful news that simply couldn't wait. She beamed at us both. I've decided to move closer. I found the most darling little house just 3 blocks away. Won't that be lovely? The spatula clattered to the floor. Aaron's face paled as he looked at me, then back to his mother. Mom, that's quite a decision. Are you sure? Gloria's eyes narrowed. Of course I'm sure. Don't you want me nearby? Especially when you two finally decide to give me grandchildren. She turned to me, her gaze sharp. Speaking of which, Emily, have you seen a doctor about your situation? At your age, fertility can be such a concern. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the counter, feeling as if the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. We. Mom, Aaron interjected, his voice strained. Emily and I haven't decided about children yet. It's a big decision. Gloria's laugh was like glass shattering. Oh, Aaron, you're not getting any younger either, you know. And Emily, well... She gave me a pitying look. Tick-tock, dear. Something inside me snapped. That's enough! I shouted, surprising even myself. I will not be bullied in my own home. Our family planning is none of your business, Gloria. The room fell silent. Aaron stared at me, wide-eyed, while Gloria's face flushed an angry red. Well, I never, she huffed. Aaron, are you going to let her speak to me like that? I turned to my husband, silently pleading for support. He looked between us, conflict etched on his face. Mom, Emily's right. We need some space to make these decisions on our own. Gloria's eyes filled with tears. My own son, turning against me, after all I've sacrificed for you. She gathered her purse, heading for the door. I suppose I'll just go home and die alone, shall I? As the door slammed behind her, Aaron slumped into a chair. God, Em, what are we going to do? I sank down beside him, emotionally drained. I don't know, Aaron, but something has to change. I can't live like this anymore. He reached for my hand, his touch hesitant. Maybe we should start trying. For a baby, I mean. It might make things easier with Mom. I jerked my hand away, stung. Is that what you want? To have a child just to appease your mother? Aaron's face crumpled. No, I don't know what I want anymore. As I looked at my husband, the man I loved, but who seemed increasingly like a stranger, a cold realization washed over me. Our marriage was hanging by a thread, and Gloria's scissors were poised to snip it. Aaron, I said softly, my heart breaking. We need help. Real help. Or I don't think we're going to make it. His silence was deafening, and in that moment, I felt more alone than ever before. The weeks following Gloria's announcement of her impending move blurred together in a haze of tension and unspoken resentment. I found myself withdrawing, spending more time alone in our bedroom, away from Aaron's conflicted gaze and the constant reminders of our crumbling marriage. One particularly gloomy afternoon, I sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at the pregnancy test in my trembling hands. 2 pink lines stared back at me, undeniable and life-altering. Emily? Aaron's voice called from the hallway. Are you okay? You've been in there a while? I opened the door, my face a mask of shock. I'm pregnant, I whispered. Aaron's eyes widened, a mix of emotions flashing across his face. Are you sure? I nodded, holding up the test. I've been feeling off for weeks. I thought it was just stress, but he reached for me, then hesitated. This is... wow. I mean, it's what Mom wanted, right? His words hit me like a slap. What your mother wanted? Is that all you can think about? Aaron backpedaled. No, I didn't mean... Save it, I snapped, pushing past him. I need some air. I grabbed my keys and stormed out, ignoring Aaron's calls behind me. The cool autumn air hit my face as I walked aimlessly through our neighborhood, my mind reeling. A baby. Our baby. The one thing that should have brought us closer was instead highlighting the chasm between us. Lost in thought, I didn't notice the familiar car pulling up beside me until I heard her voice. Emily, what on earth are you doing out here alone? I turned to see Gloria, her face a picture of exaggerated concern. Just taking a walk, I muttered. She clucked her tongue. Nonsense. Get in. I'll drive you home. Too exhausted to argue, I slid into the passenger's seat. Gloria chatted away, filling me in on her moving plans and the latest neighborhood gossip. I stared out the window, my hand unconsciously resting on my still flat stomach. Emily? Gloria's voice cut through my reverie. Are you even listening to me? I turned to face her, suddenly overwhelmed by the weight of my secret. I'm pregnant, I blurted out. Gloria's car swerved slightly before she regained control. What did you say? I'm pregnant, I repeated, my voice stronger. Aaron and I are having a baby. The car screeched to a halt as Gloria pulled over. She turned to me, her eyes gleaming with a mix of triumph and calculation. Oh, Emily, this is wonderful news. I knew you two would come around eventually. Have you told Aaron yet? Oh, we must start planning immediately. I have so many ideas for the nursery. Of course, I'll need to be there every step of the way to guide you. First-time mothers need all the help they can get, you know. Her words washed over me in a suffocating wave. This moment, which should have been filled with joy and excitement, felt tainted by Gloria's presumptuous planning and barely concealed criticism. Gloria, I interrupted, my voice shaking. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but Aaron and I need to process this ourselves first. We'll make our own decisions about the baby. Her face hardened. Now, Emily, don't be foolish. You clearly need guidance. Why, when I was pregnant with Aaron... Stop, I shouted, surprising us both. This is not about you, Gloria. This is about me, Aaron, and our child, our family. Gloria's eyes narrowed dangerously. Family? I am family, Emily. More so than you, it seems. Aaron will want me involved, you'll see. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Aaron. Where are you? Mom's here, looking for you. She seems upset. I looked up to see we were parked in front of our house, Aaron standing on the porch with a confused expression. Gloria was already out of the car, striding towards him with purpose. Aaron, darling, she called out. Emily has the most wonderful news. I scrambled out of the car, my heart pounding. Gloria, don't... But it was too late. As I watched Gloria embrace Aaron, whispering in his ear, I saw the future I had imagined for us slipping away. Our joyous announcement, our private celebration, all stolen in an instant. Aaron's eyes met mine over Gloria's shoulder, a mix of confusion, joy, and something else I couldn't quite name. In that moment, I realized that my pregnancy wasn't just the beginning of a new life. It was the catalyst that would either save our marriage or destroy it completely. As my pregnancy progressed, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The joy of impending motherhood was constantly overshadowed by the growing distance between Aaron and me. Even more surprising was Gloria's sudden change in behavior. "Emily, dear, you simply must put your feet up," Gloria cooed, fluffing a pillow behind me. In my day, we knew the importance of rest for expectant mothers. I blinked in confusion, unused to this new, attentive version of my mother-in-law. "Thank you, Gloria. That's thoughtful of you," she beamed, patting my hand. "Anything for my grandbaby. Now, let me fetch you some herbal tea. It's excellent for morning sickness." As Gloria bustled off to the kitchen, I caught Aaron's eye. He shrugged, looking as bewildered as I felt. "I guess the baby news really changed things," he said, a hint of relief in his voice. I nodded, unsure how to feel about this unexpected turn of events. Part of me was grateful for the reprieve from Gloria's constant criticism, but another part remained wary, waiting for the other shoe to drop. As the weeks passed, Gloria's overbearing attentiveness began to grate on my nerves. She was constantly at our house, offering unsolicited advice and making plans for the baby's future. Meanwhile, Aaron grew increasingly distant, often working late and seeming distracted when he was home. One evening, as I sat alone in the nursery we'd begun to prepare, I heard Aaron's key in the lock. Glancing at the clock, I frowned. It was past 10 p.m., another late night at the office. Aaron called out softly. "You still up?" I waddled out to the hallway, one hand on my growing belly. "Hey," I said, trying to keep the accusation out of my voice. "Long day?" He nodded, avoiding my eyes. "Yeah, big project. Sorry I missed dinner." "Again," I added, unable to keep the bitterness from my tone. Aaron sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I said I was sorry, Em. What more do you want?" "I want my husband back," I exploded, months of frustration boiling over. "I want the man who used to be excited about our baby, who used to talk to me, who used to—" I trailed off, choking back a sob. Aaron's face crumpled. "Em, I'm trying. It's just, there's a lot of pressure at work, and with Mom always around." "Don't blame this on your mother," I snapped. "She may be overbearing, but at least she's here. Where are you, Aaron? Because it sure doesn't feel like you're in this with me." He reached for me, but I stepped back. "I need some air," I muttered, grabbing my coat and keys. "Emily, wait." But I was already out the door, tears blurring my vision as I made my way to the car. I drove aimlessly, eventually finding myself at a small park near our house. Sitting on a bench, I watched young families playing, their laughter a stark contrast to the heaviness in my heart. My phone buzzed insistently. Thinking it was Aaron, I almost ignored it, but something made me look. It was a text from an unknown number. "Your husband isn't working late. He's with her again. Lincoln Hotel, room 302. See for yourself." My blood ran cold. With trembling hands, I started the car and drove to the hotel, my mind racing with possibilities, each worse than the last. As I approached room 302, I heard muffled laughter. Aaron's laugh, followed by a woman's voice I didn't recognize. I stood frozen, my hand poised to knock, when suddenly the door swung open. Aaron stood there, his shirt untucked, lipstick on his collar. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of a young woman hastily buttoning her blouse. Our eyes met, and in that moment, my world shattered. "Emily," Aaron gasped, his face draining of color. "I can explain." But I was already running, one hand protectively cradling my belly, the other wiping away hot tears of betrayal. As I drove home in a daze, one thought crystallized in my mind. I had to protect myself and my baby, no matter the cost. The life I had known was over. Now, I had to figure out how to build a new one from the ashes of betrayal. The days following my discovery of Aaron's infidelity passed in a blur of numbness and disbelief. I wandered our house like a ghost, mechanically going through the motions of daily life while my mind raced with unanswered questions and suppressed rage. Aaron's desperate attempts to explain and apologize fell on deaf ears. I couldn't bear to look at him, let alone listen to his excuses. Gloria, sensing the tension but unaware of its cause, hovered anxiously, her newfound solicitousness now grating on my last nerve. One afternoon, as I sat in the nursery folding tiny onesies, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at Riverside Cafe at 3 p.m. if you want to know the whole truth." My heart raced. Could this be the same person who had tipped me off about Aaron's affair? Despite my better judgment, I found myself driving to the cafe, curiosity and desperation overriding caution. As I entered, a young woman with sleek blonde hair waved me over. My stomach clenched as I recognized her from the hotel room. "Emily," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "I'm Samantha. Thank you for coming." I sat down stiffly, my hands protectively cradling my belly. "Why did you want to meet?" Samantha sighed, pushing a folder across the table. "Because you deserve to know everything. Aaron's been lying to both of us." With trembling hands, I opened the folder. Inside were photos, receipts, and printed emails documenting Aaron's affair, not just with Samantha, but with multiple women over the past year. "He told me he was separated," Samantha explained, her eyes brimming with tears. "When I found out about you and the baby, I knew I had to come clean." I stared at the evidence, feeling as if the ground had opened up beneath me. How long have you known?" "A few weeks," she admitted. "I've been gathering evidence." "Emily, there's more you need to know. Aaron's been embezzling from his company to fund these affairs. He's in deep trouble, and I'm afraid he might try to pin it on me." My mind reeled. The Aaron I thought I knew, my loving, supportive husband, was a complete stranger. A liar, a cheater, and now a thief. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Samantha reached across the table, hesitating before placing her hand on mine. "Because I was wrong to get involved with a married man, and I want to make it right. You need to protect yourself and your baby, Emily." As I drove home, my emotions swung wildly between devastation and fury. How could Aaron do this to us? To our unborn child? And how had I been so blind? Entering our house, I found Aaron and Gloria in the living room, their hushed conversations stopping abruptly at my appearance. "Emily, honey?" Gloria cooed, her saccharine tone setting my teeth on edge. "Where have you been? We've been so worried." I ignored her, fixing my gaze on Aaron. "We need to talk. Now." Gloria started to protest, but Aaron cut her off. "Mom, please, give us some privacy." As soon as we were alone, I slammed the folder down on the coffee table. "Explain this," I hissed. Aaron's face drained of color as he flipped through the contents. I can explain." "Explain what?" I exploded. "How you've been cheating on me for a year? How you've been stealing from your company? How you've lied to me every single day?" He reached for me, but I recoiled. "Emily, please. I made mistakes, but I love you. We can work this out." I laughed bitterly. "Work it out? There's nothing left to work out, Aaron. It's over." "You can't mean that," he pleaded. "Think about the baby. We're a family." The mention of our child ignited a fierce protectiveness within me. "That's exactly what I'm thinking about. Our baby deserves better than a lying, cheating father." Aaron's face hardened. "You can't take my child away from me. If you try to leave, I'll fight you for custody. Who do you think the courts will favor, a successful businessman or an unemployed housewife?" His threat hung in the air between us, and in that moment, I knew I had to be smarter than him. I couldn't let him know my next move. Forcing tears to my eyes, I softened my voice. "You're right. I'm just upset. We should talk about this when we're both calmer." Relief washed over Aaron's face. "Of course, Em. We'll figure this out together." As he pulled me into an embrace, my mind was already formulating a plan. I would play the forgiving wife, but in secret I would prepare for war. For the sake of my child, I would take down Aaron and Gloria, no matter the cost. The game had changed, and I was determined to win. The weeks following my discovery of Aaron's betrayal were a masterclass in deception. I played the role of the forgiving wife to perfection, all while secretly preparing my escape. Every gentle touch from Aaron, every sympathetic glance from Gloria only fueled my determination to break free. As my pregnancy progressed, I focused on gathering evidence. Late at night, I combed through financial records, documented Aaron's absences, and built a case that would ensure my freedom and my child's future. The weight of my secret felt crushing at times, but the life growing inside me gave me strength. Then, during a routine checkup, my world shifted again. "Mrs. Thompson," the ultrasound technician said, her voice filled with excitement, "I have wonderful news. You're having twins." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Twins. 2 precious lives depending on me. As joy and terror warred within me, I realized the stakes had just doubled. Leaving the clinic in a daze, I nearly collided with Gloria, who was waiting in the parking lot. "Emily, dear," "How was your appointment?" she chirped, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. I hesitated, then made a split-second decision. "It's twins," I said, watching her reaction carefully. Gloria's face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Twins? Oh, this is marvelous. Aaron will be overjoyed. We must start planning immediately. I'll call the country club, book the perfect baby shower venue, and of course you'll need my help more than ever now. I'll just have to move in to assist with the babies." As Gloria rambled on, making plans for my future, our future, without a second thought to my input, something inside me snapped. The facade I'd carefully maintained for weeks crumbled. "No," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Gloria paused mid-sentence. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "I said no," I repeated, louder this time. "You won't be moving in, you won't be planning my baby shower, and you certainly won't be making decisions about my children's future." Gloria's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Now, Emily, don't be foolish. You clearly can't handle twins on your own. Aaron and I—" "Aaron?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean the man who's been cheating on me for the past year? The one who's been embezzling from his company to fund his affairs?" Gloria's face paled. "What are you talking about? That's preposterous." I pulled out my phone, showing her the evidence I'd gathered. "It's all true, Gloria. Your perfect son isn't so perfect after all." As Gloria sputtered and denied, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. "I'm leaving him, Gloria. I'm taking my babies and starting a new life, far away from you and Aaron." Gloria's shock quickly turned to rage. "You ungrateful little tramp, after everything we've done for you, you'll never get away with this. We'll fight you for custody. You'll have nothing." Her words hit me like a physical blow, but I stood my ground. "Try it," I hissed. "I have enough evidence to bury Aaron. One word from me, and his career, his reputation, everything will be destroyed." As I turned to leave, Gloria grabbed my arm. "You can't do this to us. To Aaron. He loves you." I wrenched my arm free. "Love, is that what you call lying, cheating, and stealing? No, Gloria, that's not love, and I won't let my children grow up thinking it is." Driving home, my emotions swung wildly between elation and despair. The knowledge that I was carrying twins, two precious lives depending on me, filled me with a fierce, protective love. But the reality of my situation, a failing marriage, a deceitful husband, and a vindictive mother-in-law, threatened to overwhelm me. As I pulled into our driveway, I saw Aaron's car. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself for the confrontation to come. I had to tell him about the twins, had to gauge his reaction. It would be the final test, the moment that would determine whether there was anything left to salvage or if I needed to accelerate my plans to leave. With trembling hands, I opened the front door, the weight of my future and my children's future heavy on my shoulders. Whatever happened next would change everything. There was no turning back now. The confrontation with Aaron about the twins had been the final straw. His initial joy quickly morphed into panic about finances and how this would affect his freedom. In that moment, I knew there was no future for us. With shaking hands, I packed a small bag and drove to my parents' house, tears blurring my vision the entire way. Mom opened the door, her smile fading as she took in my disheveled appearance. "Emily, sweetheart, what's wrong?" I collapsed into her arms, sobs racking my body. Dad appeared behind her, his face etched with concern. They ushered me inside, and through broken sobs, I poured out the whole sordid tale. Aaron's affairs, the embezzlement, Gloria's manipulations, and finally the twins. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, Emily, I'm so sorry. We had no idea." Dad's face darkened with anger. "That son of a— I'll kill him." I shook my head vehemently. "No, Dad, I need to handle this myself, for the babies." They exchanged a worried glance before Mom asked, "What are you going to do?" Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself. "I'm going to divorce him, after the twins are born." The words hung heavy in the air. My parents, shocked into silence, simply held me as I cried. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. My parents rallied around me, helping me contact lawyers and make plans for the future. Aaron called incessantly, alternating between tearful apologies and angry threats. I let them all go to voicemail, focusing instead on my health and the babies growing inside me. As my due date approached, the stress began to take its toll. My blood pressure spiked and the doctor ordered bed rest. Confined to my childhood bedroom, I felt like a prisoner in my own body, my mind racing with worries about the future. One afternoon, as I lay trying to nap, I heard raised voices downstairs. Curious, I crept to the top of the stairs, my heart pounding as I recognized the voices. "How dare you show up here?" Dad's voice boomed. "After what you've done to our daughter." "Please, Mr. Johnson," Aaron pleaded. "I just want to talk to Emily, to make things right." "There's nothing to make right," Mom interjected, her usually gentle voice hard as steel. "You've done enough damage. Leave before we call the police." "You can't keep me from my children," Aaron shouted. "I have rights." I gripped the banister, my knees weak. How dare he? After everything he'd done, he thought he had rights? Suddenly, a sharp pain ripped through my abdomen. I gasped, doubling over. Another pain followed, more intense than the first. "Mom," I called out, my voice strained. "Dad." The arguing voices below fell silent. Then a flurry of footsteps on the stairs. "Emily?" Mom's worried face appeared. "Oh, God, are you in labor?" I nodded, unable to speak through the pain. Dad appeared behind her side, his face pale. "I'm calling an ambulance," he said, pulling out his phone. "No." Aaron's voice came from behind them. "I'll drive. It'll be faster." For a moment we all froze, the tension palpable. Then another contraction hit, and I cried out in pain. "Fine," Dad growled, "but I'm coming with you." The drive to the hospital was a blur of pain and fear. Aaron kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, his face a mask of worry and guilt. Dad sat beside me in the back seat, holding my hand and murmuring words of encouragement. As we pulled up to the emergency entrance, a terrifying thought struck me. What if Aaron tried to take the babies? What if he and Gloria conspired to keep them from me? Panic seized me, making it hard to breathe. "Dad," I gasped, "don't let him near the babies. Promise me." Dad's eyes met mine, understanding dawning in them. He nodded solemnly. "I promise, sweetheart. He won't get near them." As the nurses wheeled me into the delivery room, I caught one last glimpse of Aaron's face, a mixture of longing, regret, and something that looked almost like determination. In that moment, I knew that the real battle was just beginning. The doors swung shut behind me, and I steeled myself for what was to come. My children's future hung in the balance, and I was determined to fight with everything I had to protect them, no matter the cost. 3 months after the twins' birth, I stood at the front door of what was once my home, my heart pounding. Dad waited in the car with the babies, ready to intervene if needed. With a deep breath, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was eerily quiet as I made my way to the bedroom, filling a suitcase with my remaining belongings. As I reached for a photo album on the top shelf, a stack of papers tumbled down. Curious, I picked them up, my blood running cold as I realized what they were. "Kate, how much did you inherit?" Mark's voice cut through the heavy silence of the night. "Your dad was loaded. I need to know what you got." The words felt like slaps in the face. I looked at my husband, searching for any sign that this was some misguided attempt to comfort me. But his eyes were cold, calculating. Tonight of all nights, my father's funeral, and this is where his mind was? "Nothing," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "There wasn't anything left by the time the medical bills were paid." Mark's lip curled into a sneer. "Really? Is that the story you're sticking with?" I stood my ground. "Yes, it is." He scoffed and turned away, mumbling something about how incompetent my brother Mike must have been in handling everything. I could feel the unease settle deep in my gut. Mark's true intentions were becoming clear, and they weren't pretty. I moved to the kitchen, needing a moment away from his probing eyes. I started the kettle, hoping a cup of tea might soothe my nerves, but the quiet clinking of the spoon in my mug did nothing to drown out the alarming thoughts racing through my head. Mark's voice reached me even from the other room. "I need a drink," he grumbled, the sound of him rummaging through the liquor cabinet, loud and grating. How had I missed these signs? Or had I just ignored them, hoping things would magically get better? He walked into the kitchen, glass of whiskey in hand. "You know, I thought marrying you meant a step up in the world," he said bluntly. But apparently I was wrong. I didn't reply. Words felt useless against his blatant greed. I just stared into my tea, feeling more alone than ever. After a tense silence, he finally left the room. I heard the TV flicker on, blaring some mindless show. I clenched my fists around the mug. This was the moment, right now, where everything broke open. I couldn't ignore who he was anymore, and I certainly couldn't let him have any power over my future. I decided to keep a closer watch on him. It was clear now that I couldn't trust him, that whatever affection we once shared had withered away, replaced by his hunger for wealth and status. A few days later, I received a call from my mother, Paula. She didn't offer condolences or ask how I was doing, just launched into complaints about sorting out Dad's affairs. Typical. She always favored Mike, and I was used to being the afterthought. "Kate, I need you to help with the house," she droned. "Sure, Mom," I replied mechanically. "I'll be over tomorrow." "Bring Mark," she added. "We could use a man's help." I felt my frustration spike, but kept my voice even. "Mark's busy. It'll just be me." The call ended abruptly, and I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear long after she hung up. Mark breezed into the room just then, sipping another whiskey. "Spout, pack your things," I said suddenly. He looked at me, puzzled. "What for?" "We're going to Mom's tomorrow. She needs help with Dad's stuff." He scowled. "Are you serious? I have better things to do." "You're coming," I replied firmly, our eyes locking in a silent battle. Eventually, he shrugged and walked away. That night, as I lay in bed, I listened to his soft snores and felt a pit of fear and determination grow within me. This facade was crumbling, and soon everything would come to light. It was time to brace myself for the storm. I pulled up to the old family home, a sense of dread settling over me. Mark sat in the passenger seat, tapping his fingers impatiently on the dashboard. "Let's get this over with," he muttered as he climbed out of the car. As we walked up the path, memories flooded back. The house looked the same, yet everything felt different. The door swung open, and there was Paula, her face a mix of annoyance and impatience. "It's about time," she snapped. "I've been dealing with everything on my own." I stepped inside, brushing past her coldness. "Mom, this is Mark," I introduced, though she'd met him briefly at the funeral. Paula glanced at him and nodded curtly before turning her back on us. "Mike's in the study, going through paperwork. You two can start in there." I followed her voice to the study, the room an organized mess of papers, file cabinets, and old mementos. Mike barely looked up as we entered. Seeing him again was like running into a brick wall. His smirk was as smug as ever. "Hey, big sis," he scoffed. "Finally showed up to pitch in?" "You might say that," I replied tersely. "Let's just get through this, all right?" Mark hovered by the bookshelf, shifting his weight and looking uncomfortable. Paula's voice echoed from the hallway, giving orders like a drill sergeant. I rolled up my sleeves and dipped into the dreariness of sorting through years of memories and documents. Hours passed, the air thick with unspoken tension and strained small talk. Mark wandered out, leaving me to fend for myself with Paula and Mike. "This is pointless," Mike grumbled, tossing another stack of papers aside. "Dad should have taken better care of this stuff." "Maybe if you'd helped him once in a while." I let the words trail off, biting back more I wanted to say, but Mike just ignored me, pulling out another drawer, searching for something of value. Just then Paula stormed in. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she said, her tone dripping with irritation. "Why are you two still in here? There's more to do in the garage." We moved to the garage, and I got hit by another wave of nostalgia mixed with frustration. Old boxes of Christmas decorations, tools my dad barely used, and a neglected bike Mike rode once before, demanding a new one. Mark had reappeared, leaning against the car and scrolling through his phone. I could sense his growing irritation. He wasn't here to help. He was here to gain. While I rummaged around, Paula fixed me with a hard look. "You know," she started, "your brother was always the responsible one. Your father and I could depend on him." My grip tightened on an old photo album. "Is that so?" "Yes," she snapped, clearly relishing the criticism. "Unlike you, running off when things got tough." I felt my pulse quicken, but I forced myself to breathe deeply. No point in arguing now. I glanced at Mark, who seemed to be barely masking his impatience. For the first time, I felt a flicker of anger at him, not just for his greed, but for what I now saw as a willful blindness to the person I had become. Eventually, exhausted and angry, we decided to call it a day. Mike and Paula stayed behind, and Mark and I drove home in silence. When we got there, Mark finally spoke. "Your family's something else, you know," he said, almost as if admiring them. "Tell me about it," I mumbled, feeling drained. As I shut the door behind us, I already knew this wasn't the end. Things were just beginning to unravel, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. The storm was coming, and this time I wouldn't be caught off guard. I met Mark when I was just getting by at a dull office job. It wasn't much, but it was steady, unlike my up-and-down family life. Mark walked into the office one day, suave and confident. He made me laugh during our coffee breaks, and soon enough we were dating. I thought he was my escape. One evening, I decided to take him to meet my family, hoping for some strange reason they'd approve. We drove to my old neighborhood, my anxiety growing with each mile. When we arrived, the door swung open, and there was my mother. "Who's this, then?" Paula asked, eyeing Mark up and down like he was another project to criticize. "It's Mark," I said, pushing down my nerves. "My husband." Paula's eyebrow arched. "Oh, finally snagged someone, did you?" Mark put his arm around me, trying to lighten the mood. "Nice to meet you, Paula. Kate's told me so much about you." She ignored his outstretched hand, focusing instead on who really mattered to her. "Come inside," she said curtly, turning toward the living room. Mike lounged on the couch, flipping through TV channels, not even bothering to look up. "Sup?" he muttered, finally glancing our way. I took a deep breath. "Mark, this is Mike, my brother." "Hey," Mark offered, but Mike just nodded, turning back to the screen. It hurt seeing how little they'd changed. Paula and Mike centered around their own little world. At dinner, the tension thickened with every passing minute. Paula gushed over Mike's recent promotion, never asking about my life or my job. I could see Mark trying to keep up, looking uncomfortable. "So, what do you do, Mark?" Mike asked suddenly, not out of interest but as a challenge. "I'm an investment consultant," he replied. Mike smirked. "Guess that pays the bills, huh?" "It does," Mark said flatly, his patience wearing thin. The real blow came later when I found my father seated alone in his study. He looked so different, frail and tired, with his breathing labored. It broke my heart. He'd been a distant but kind presence in my chaotic childhood, working tirelessly to provide for us. "Hey, Dad," I said softly, his eyes lighting up slightly at the sound of my voice. "Kate, you're here," he rasped, a weak smile appearing. We talked quietly, catching up on lost time. He confided in me, telling me how hard it had been to manage things lately, how disappointed he was in how Paula and Mike were handling everything. He looked pained, not just physically but emotionally. "I'm sorry, Kate," he whispered. "I wish I could have done more for you." I squeezed his hand. "It's okay, Dad. You did what you could." Leaving the room, my chest tightened. Mark was in the kitchen, watching the interaction between Paula and Mike, his face unreadable. "It's a mess," he whispered as we walked out. "Your family, I mean." "I know," I whispered back, my voice barely holding together. This visit had reminded me why I left. The toxic dynamic between my mother and brother, their constant need to belittle me, to treat me as an afterthought. Later that night, as we drove home in silence, I made a promise to myself. I would be there for my dad, but I wouldn't be used by anyone again. Not by Paula, not by Mike, and certainly not by Mark. A week after that unsettling visit, I got a call from my mother. Her voice was tense. "Your father's getting worse, Kate," she said. "We need help." I knew this day would come. "I'll come over today," I replied, already dreading the interaction that lay ahead. I drove to the house, my mind weighing heavy with the mix of obligation and resentment. Mark didn't come this time, claiming he had a meeting. Might have been true, but I doubted it. Paula met me at the door, her face stern. "He's in his room," she said without a hint of gratitude. "And don't touch the things in the living room. Mike's sorting through some important stuff." I nodded and walked towards my father's room. Dad was propped up in bed, looking frailer than ever. His eyes met mine, a weary smile forming. "Kate, good to see you," he said, his voice a whisper. "I'm here to help, Dad," I replied, taking his hand. Over the next few days, I fell into a routine of caring for him, administering his medication, making sure he was comfortable, and speaking softly to ease his pain. Paula and Mike mostly stayed in the background, with their true colors showing through their absence. One evening, I overheard a heated conversation in the living room. Paula's voice was shrill. "We need more money, Mike. Your father's hospital bills are eating up everything." "We can't sell the house yet," Mike replied. "People would talk." I paused outside the door, my anger simmering. They were already planning how to cash in, even as Dad lay dying in the next room. I entered the room, making no effort to hide my presence. "Is this really the time to be talking about money?" I snapped. Paula glared at me. "Don't you start. You disappeared for years while we dealt with everything." "Dealt with everything?" I echoed incredulously. Is that what you call living off Dad while he worked himself into the ground? Mike stood up, his eyes cold. You have no idea what it's been like. You left. And I had every reason to leave, I shot back. Paula folded her arms. We'll see how long you last this time. That night, I sat by my father, listening to his labored breaths. He opened his eyes and looked at me, sadness mingled with relief. Kate, I'm so sorry for everything. My chest tightened. Dad, you don't have to apologize. He shook his head weakly. I wasn't there for you. Should have protected you from them. I couldn't hold back the tears. I'm here now. The following morning, I found Paula rifling through his drawer. I stood in the doorway, my voice cold as ice. What are you doing? She looked up, startled. Just organizing his things. Sure, I said, my tone flat. Because you've always been so organized, right? She slammed the drawer shut. Don't you dare judge me. I'm not judging, I'm observing, I replied, moving to sit by my father who had just woken up. The days dragged on with the same routine, the house thick with tension. Mike occasionally showed his face, usually to complain about something or another. I stayed focused, doing what I could for Dad. One evening, Dad's eyes sought mine with a seriousness I hadn't seen in a while. There's a bank account, he whispered. My heart skipped a beat. Bank account? He nodded, struggling for breath. Not much, but it's yours. Secret. Use it wisely, Kate. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized the weight of his words. He'd done what he could to ensure I had something, a small act of protection amidst the chaos. I squeezed his hand, promising myself I would make it count. Knowing what I now did, I felt a flicker of hope and determination. My father's efforts wouldn't be in vain. I wouldn't let Paula, Mike, or even Mark control my fate any longer. This was just the beginning, and I was ready for whatever came next. The call came just after midnight. I had been tossing and turning in bed, my mind restless, when the phone rang, cutting through the silence. It's your father. Paula's voice was clipped, devoid of emotion. He's been taken to the hospital. I scrambled out of bed, barely replying as I threw on some clothes and grabbed my keys. By the time I reached the hospital, my heart was pounding with dread. I found Paula and Mike in the waiting area, looking annoyed rather than distressed. The doctors are with him, Paula said brusquely. We've been waiting for hours. I didn't bother to respond. Rushing past them, I found the room where Dad lay, surrounded by machines and tubes. He looked impossibly weak, barely recognizing me as I stepped closer. Kate, he murmured. I'm here, Dad, I whispered, clutching his hand. His grip was feeble but urgent. Remember, the account. It's for you. I know, I said, fighting back tears. I'll take care of it. Moments later, his breathing grew shallow. The monitors beeped frantically and nurses rushed in. I was gently but firmly pushed out of the room. Paula and Mike stood in the hallway, waiting as if they were bored. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor emerged, his face solemn. I'm sorry, he said. He didn't make it. Paula's face hardened, betraying nothing. Mike sighed, as if inconvenienced. I fought to keep my composure, feeling a mix of grief and rage. They didn't even care. Back at the house, it didn't take long for tensions to explode. As I gathered some of Dad's belongings, Mike cornered me in the hallway. What's this about a secret account? He demanded. I stared at him, anger flaring. None of your business. He stepped closer, his face contorted with a smirk. I know he said something to you. You think you're getting away with it? Paula appeared behind him, arms crossed. Don't hold out on us, Kate. Whatever your father left, it's family property. Don't you dare, I snapped, my voice shaking with incredulity. You two leeched off him your whole lives. This is mine. Mike lunged, grabbing my arm. You're not taking anything, you ungrateful. I yanked free, my temper boiling over. Get your hands off me. Mark chose that moment to stroll in, smirking as he took in the scene. What's all this commotion? Kate thinks she's entitled to Dad's secret stash, Mike sneered. Secret stash? Mark's eyes lit up greedily. Fed up? I turned to leave, but Paula blocked my path. You're not going anywhere, she spat. Not until you tell us where that money is. Over my dead body, I hissed, pushing past them. I stormed out, my heart racing. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about standing up to them, about breaking free from their grasp. I knew what I had to do, and I wasn't going to back down. That night, I sat in my apartment, clutching the small bank booklet Dad had given me. The modest sum was enough to start fresh, to carve out a new path for myself. Their selfishness and greed had pushed me too far. I wasn't the same naive girl they could push around. They were about to learn the hard way that I wasn't someone to mess with. From here on out, I would take control of my life. Their time of exploiting everything and everyone was over. The first steps of my plan were clear. The storm was here and I was ready to face it head-on. I returned to my apartment, the weight of my father's funeral still hanging heavily over me. I barely had time to process my own grief before Mark cornered me in the kitchen. "Kate," he started, his eyes hard with impatience, "we need to talk about the inheritance again." I felt a surge of anger. "We've been over this. There's nothing significant." His face twisted with frustration. "Stop lying. I overheard Mike talking about a secret account. Your dad must have left something worth hiding." I glared at him, feeling my blood boil. "And what if he did?" "It's none of your business." "None of my business," he scoffed, stepping closer. "I'm your husband. Whatever you have, I have a right to it too." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I didn't marry you so you could pocket my family's money, Mark." His eyes narrowed. "You're being ridiculous. Besides, there's something else you should know." I crossed my arms. "What now?" Mark hesitated for a split second before dropping the bombshell. "I've been seeing someone else." The room seemed to spin for a moment. I steadied myself against the counter. "What?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Lana," he said matter-of-factly. "Mike's girlfriend. We've been seeing each other for months." Suddenly everything fell into place. His aloofness, the constant pressure about the inheritance, it all made sense. He had been planning this all along. You vile?" I started, but he cut me off. "And that's not all," he continued, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a set of papers. "I want a divorce. Sign these." I stared at the divorce papers he placed on the counter, feeling a strange mix of anger and calm. Somehow his betrayal was almost a relief. It was the final confirmation that I needed to break free from him. I grabbed a pen and started signing. He watched me, clearly expecting more of a fight, but I was done. Finished. As I handed the papers back, I felt a sense of liberation. "Fine," I said, my voice steady. "Good riddance." A moment of silence passed, then Mark's smugness reappeared. "Hope you and your so-called inheritance are very happy." Just then, he walked out the door, leaving me alone in the kitchen. I sat down, breathing deeply, taking in the newfound sense of freedom. Mark was out of my life, and I couldn't be happier. The days that followed felt strangely bright despite the chaos. Mark had moved in with Lana, his dreams of wealth tied to her. Meanwhile, I used my father's modest inheritance to start planning for my future. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough to rebuild. A couple of weeks later, the phone rang. It was Mike. "We need to talk," he said bluntly. "What now?" I replied, tired of their antics. "Mark," he spat out. "He moved in with Lana, thinking her family has money. They don't." I couldn't help but laugh. "Just desserts." "Good luck dealing with him," I said. "Not my problem anymore." "You're going to regret this," he hissed before hanging up. I leaned against the wall, feeling a small but satisfying victory. Mark's arrogance had led him right into a trap of his own making. As for me, I had a fresh slate and endless possibilities before me. Let them scheme and plot. I had learned the hard way how to stand up for myself, and nothing they did could take that away from me. I was finally free, ready to live life on my terms. The storm had come and gone, leaving me stronger and more determined than ever. And I wasn't done yet. I had plans, and nothing was going to stop me now. Mark's arrogant assumption that Lana's family had money proved to be his downfall. Within weeks, he was calling incessantly. At first, I ignored him, savoring the peace. One evening, the phone rang once more. I sighed and picked it up. "Hello?" "Kate, we need to talk." Mark's voice was desperate, a far cry from his usual arrogance. "Why? So you can try to worm your way back into my life?" I replied, my tone icy. "It's not like that," he pleaded. "Lana's family found out about us. They threw me out." I stifled a laugh, though I felt a tiny sense of satisfaction. "Not my problem," I said simply. "Kate, please," he continued, his voice wavering. "I made a mistake. We can fix this." I paused for a moment, savoring the irony. "You mean you finally realized what you had?" "Yes," he admitted, his voice almost a whisper. "I've been an idiot." "Well, I'm glad you admit it," I replied coolly. "But it's too late. You made your bed, Mark. Now lie in it." The silence stretched out between us, heavy and final. "Is that it, then?" he asked, his voice breaking. That's it, I confirmed and hung up the phone. In the weeks that followed, I heard through the grapevine that Mark had been couch surfing, desperate and out of options. Mike had quickly distanced himself, blaming Mark for everything that went wrong and conveniently forgetting his own role in the mess. For once, I felt in control. I moved forward with my life, securing a small but significant freelance business. The inheritance my father left me became the seed money I needed. I poured my focus and determination into work, savoring the freedom and independence I had long craved. One crisp morning, while I was responding to client emails, the phone rang again. The caller ID showed Mike's number. I considered ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. Hello? You think you're so smart, don't you? Mike's voice seethed with anger. Dad's money was supposed to be for all of us. I earned it, Mike. You and Mom took everything else while Dad was alive, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I hope you're happy, he spat. We're losing the house. I took a deep breath. His anger was almost palpable, but it no longer had power over me. Maybe now you'll understand what it's like to work for something. You'll regret this, Kate. I'll make sure of it, he snarled before hanging up abruptly. I set the phone down, feeling the weight of his threat. But instead of fear, I felt an unusual sense of calm. I had faced worse, and survived. What could Mike possibly do now? As the weeks turned into months, I flourished. My small freelance business grew, and for the first time in years, I felt grounded and secure. Every time I heard about Mike and Paula's growing financial troubles, a part of me felt vindicated. One evening, I sat in my small but cozy apartment, looking out over the city. I had come a long way, and the journey had been anything but easy. Yet, here I was, standing tall and moving forward. The ghosts of my past no longer haunted me. They were simply part of the story I had overcome. The phone rang again, but this time I didn't feel a jolt of anxiety. I picked it up calmly, ready for whatever came next. Hello? Kate, it's Mom. She started, but I cut her off, my voice steady and firm. I'm done, Mom. Take care of yourselves. I hung up, feeling a profound sense of closure. The storm had come and gone. I was free, strong, and finally living life on my own terms. The years rolled by quickly after I hung up on my mother. I poured everything into my freelance business, growing it from a side hustle into a thriving enterprise. The modest inheritance from Dad turned out to be more than just financial stability. It was the foundation for a new life. My new apartment, though small, felt like a palace. It was mine, a space free of the shadows of my past. I spent comfortable evenings reading by the window, the city lights dancing in the distance, a stark contrast to the darkness of my earlier years. One afternoon, my phone rang. Seeing an unknown number, I almost let it go to voicemail, but then answered on a whim. Hello? Kate, this is Miss Johnson from the bank. I wanted to inform you that your mother's assets have been frozen. There's been a foreclosure on the house. I paused, taking in the information. Thank you for letting me know, I said before hanging up. A few days later, I found myself walking through an old, familiar neighborhood. The house looked the same, but there was a for sale sign on the lawn. I felt an odd mix of nostalgia and triumph. Paula and Mike's reign of exploiting Dad's hard work had come to an end. My phone buzzed again, a text this time. It was from Mike. You think you've won, don't you? This isn't over. I rolled my eyes. Grow up, Mike, I muttered, texting back a simple, move on with your life. I put the phone away and continued down the street, my steps lighter than they had been in years. Months passed, and my life continued to flourish. One chilly morning, as I was setting up a new project for a client, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Mike standing there, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. Kate, he began, desperation in his voice. I need help. I sighed, stepping outside and closing the door behind me. Mike, you've had chances, plenty of them. It's different now. We've lost everything. Mom's sick, he pleaded, his bravado gone. Look, I can't keep being your crutch. You need to stand on your own, I said, my voice firm but not unkind. We're family, he insisted. Family? I scoffed. You never acted like it. You chose to ignore Dad's wishes, and now you're paying the price. His shoulders slumped. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. You need to go, I said finally. Figure out your life. He nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. I'm sorry, Kate. I watched as he walked away, a sense of finality settling over me. It wasn't my job to fix their mess anymore. I had my life to live and my own path to follow. As weeks turned into months, I started receiving updates on Paula and Mike through old neighbors. Their lives had become a cycle of struggle and regret. Strangely, I felt no satisfaction, just a profound sense of relief that I had escaped that toxic environment. One day, while taking a break from work, I found myself heading to a small, secluded park not far from my apartment. It was a quiet place, full of large oak trees and benches. I picked one near a small pond and sat down, the cool breeze soothing. As I sat there, I felt an odd sense of closeness to my father. It was almost as if his spirit was there, watching over me. I closed my eyes, taking in the peace of the moment. "I've come a long way, Dad," I whispered to the wind, feeling his presence in the rustling leaves. Opening my eyes, I looked at the world around me with a sense of accomplishment. I had fought hard for this peace, and I would cherish it. There was a future ahead, bright and full of promise, and I was ready for whatever came next. "She's nothing but a glorified maid with no education," Justin said, his voice dripping with disdain. My blood boiled instantly. I glanced around the dinner table, shocked by the cold words that shattered the air. Justin's parents, Evelyn and Richard, exchanged uneasy glances. They didn't try to hide their discomfort. "Justin, that's enough," Evelyn said, her voice trembling slightly. "Well, it's the truth, Mom," he replied, shrugging as if it was the most natural statement in the world. "Eva, you know I'm just being honest." I looked at him, my mind racing. This wasn't the man I thought I knew. His charming smile and tender gestures now seemed like a cruel facade. "Is this really what you think of me?" I asked, my voice barely steady. He leaned back in his chair, completely unfazed. "Come on, Eva, let's not make a scene. I'm sure they want to know who they're dealing with." I couldn't believe his audacity. After everything. I stopped myself, afraid my voice would crack. My heart pounded as I tried to maintain composure. I glanced at Evelyn and Richard, looking for any sign of support. Evelyn's eyes held regret, while Richard stared at his plate, seemingly lost for words. Justin's smirk was the final straw. I pushed back my chair and stood up, my hands trembling. "Excuse me," I muttered, heading towards the front door. I needed fresh air. Needed to think. "Eva, wait," Evelyn called after me. I paused, feeling her gentle hand on my shoulder. "I don't know what Justin was thinking. Please, don't judge us by his words. He can be difficult." I looked at her, her eyes sincere. "He's never talked to me like that before," I said. I don't know what to think." "Give it time, dear," she said softly. "These things have a way of sorting themselves out." I nodded weakly and stepped outside, the cool evening air hitting my face. I never imagined that the man I moved in with would turn out to be so condescending. His words echoed in my mind, each syllable cutting deeper than the last. Justin soon joined me on the porch, pretending everything was fine. "You didn't have to leave," he said casually, as if dismissing the whole affair. "I can't believe you said that," I replied, my voice quivering with suppressed anger. "Do you really think so little of me?" "Eva, you need to understand something," he said, his tone shifting to one of mild irritation. "My parents needed to know about your background. There's nothing wrong with being honest." "I need some time alone," I said, cutting him off. I couldn't stand to hear any more. He raised his hands defensively. "Fine, but don't be dramatic." I watched him walk back inside, the door closing softly behind him. I felt the weight of his words pressing down on me. This wasn't the first time I had felt his condescending attitude, but it had never been so blatant. I thought about my mother, Sharon, waiting at home for me. Her frail condition and need for constant care already wore heavily on my spirit. Justin's words cut deeper than he knew, hitting the raw nerves of my insecurities and fears. I thought I had found a partner, someone to build a life with, but tonight's events tore down that illusion. As I stood on the porch, the night air cooling my heated skin, I resolved not to let this define me. No matter how charming or successful Justin was, I had my dignity. I glanced back at the house one last time. This would not be the end, but a beginning. One way or another, I would find a way through this. "I'm out there saving lives while you flounder in mediocrity," Justin snarled as he tossed his keys on the kitchen counter. The sound of metal clanging echoed through the apartment, emphasizing his words. I froze, the dishcloth in my hand halfway to the sink. "Excuse me?" "You heard me, Eva," he said, rolling his eyes. Do you know how tiring it is to come home to this mess after a 12-hour shift? I glanced around the spotless kitchen. Nothing was out of place. What mess? I asked, exasperated. He stalked toward me, pointing a finger in my face. Your life is a mess. Look at you, a high school dropout, waiting tables and cleaning houses. Do you think that's impressive? My heart pounded as his words sank in. The man I fell in love with was nowhere to be seen. I contribute to this household, too, I managed to say, my voice trembling with anger. Justin scoffed. Barely. I cover most of the bills. What you make is peanuts. I clenched my fists, feeling the anger build up inside me, but I decided to stay calm. I'm doing the best I can, Justin, and I'm also caring for my mom. That's not nothing. He shook his head, laughing bitterly. Always your mother. You're drowning in mediocrity, and you drag me down with you. I turned away, blinking back tears. His words were like knives cutting deep. I could hear him behind me, the sound of his heavy breathing filling the room. You know what, I said, refusing to let him see me break down. Maybe you'd be happier if I wasn't here. Maybe I would, he spat out. Or maybe you could actually try to better yourself. I planted my feet firmly on the ground, turning back to face him. His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth I once adored. I thought we were partners, I said quietly. But you see me as a burden. Eva, open your eyes, he snapped. Partners? Mutual respect? That's fantasy. Welcome to reality. The sting of his words left a bitter taste in my mouth. I need some air, I said, brushing past him to the front door. I could feel his eyes burning into my back but didn't turn around. Out on the street, the cool night air felt like freedom. I tried to piece together how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. The charming, supportive man I met through the dating app was now nothing more than a controlling tyrant. As I walked, my mind drifted to the early days of our relationship, the sweet text messages, the late-night talks, and the promises that now felt hollow. I needed to talk to Sharon. The next afternoon, during one of my rare breaks, I visited her at the old family home. She lay on the couch, looking frail but cheerful. Hey, Mom, I said, trying to mask my stress with a smile. Hey, sweetheart, she replied, patting the space beside her. I sat down, and she immediately noticed something was off. Tell me what's wrong, she said. I sighed, leaning my head back against the couch. It's Justin, Mom. He's changed, or maybe I'm just now seeing the real him. She frowned, her eyes filled with concern. What happened? The way he talks to me, I began, pausing to find the right words without breaking down. He treats me like I'm less than him, like I'm nothing. She reached out and squeezed my hand. You're not nothing, Eva. You are strong, stronger than you know. Her words brought tears to my eyes, but I blinked them away. Thanks, Mom. I needed that. We sat there in shared silence, her hand in mine. In that moment, I realized that whatever the future held, I had to be strong, for myself and for her. I would not let Justin's cruelty destroy my spirit. Stop being so useless and get this house in order, Justin barked as he slammed the door behind him. The force of it sent a shiver through the apartment, like an earthquake had struck. Exhaustion turned into raw, seething anger inside me. I gripped the broom tighter, forcing myself not to snap. I've been cleaning all day, and I still have to go take care of Mom, I said, keeping my voice calm as possible. He rolled his eyes. Always an excuse with you, Eva. You think this is hard? Try doing what I do for even a day. I'm doing my best, I replied, my voice shaking. Maybe if you could help once in a while. Help? Justin cut me off, laughing bitterly. I'm a surgeon. My time is worth 10 times what yours is. You should be grateful I even talked to you. My fists clenched so tightly around the broom that my knuckles turned white. I turned my back to him, unwilling to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Taking a deep breath, I began sweeping furiously, each stroke a silent rebellion. You know, my colleagues laugh at me, he sneered. They can't believe I'm stuck with someone like you. His words stung like 1,000 paper cuts. Then why don't you just leave? I muttered under my breath, but loud enough for him to hear. He stormed over, yanking the broom from my hands and tossing it aside. Because, Eva, you need me. You need my money, my status. Without me, you're nothing. I looked up at him, my defiance bubbling to the surface. I don't need you, Justin. I won't be treated like garbage just because you have a fancy title. He stepped closer, invading my space, his eyes narrowing. Without me, you'd be on the streets. Remember that next time you think about mouthing off. The ringing of my phone interrupted the tension. I grabbed it from the counter and saw my mother's number. Relief washed over me, an escape from this prison, albeit temporary. "I have to go," I said, brushing past Justin. "My mom needs me." "Just get out," he hissed, waving me off. Barely worth my time. I walked out the door, his words echoing behind me like a dark cloud. The drive to my mother's was a blur, my mind racing with thoughts of escape. How had things turned so sour so quickly? When I arrived at my mother's house, Sharon was struggling to reach something from the top shelf in the kitchen. "Hey, Mom," I said, rushing to help her. "You should have called me." "Thanks, sweetheart," she said, her smile warm but tinged with fatigue. I forced a smile. "I'm fine, just busy. How are you feeling today?" She sat down at the kitchen table, cradling a cup of tea. "I'm okay, but you seem upset. What happened?" I opened my mouth to speak, but the words choked in my throat. "It's just Justin," I managed to say. "He's being impossible again." Her eyes filled with worry. "Eva, you don't have to put up with that. You deserve better." "I know, Mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But it's complicated. I need to figure out how to handle this." Later that night, I found myself back at the apartment, dreading the confrontation that awaited me. Justin was in bed, his back turned to me, clearly uninterested in any kind of reconciliation. I lay down beside him, staring at the ceiling. My mind was made up. I couldn't continue like this. I needed to find out who he really was. If there were secrets, I would uncover them, and then I would make him pay for every degrading word, every humiliating moment. My resolve hardened, fueling a sense of determination I didn't know I had. I would gather the evidence, plan my move, and expose the man who thought he could treat people like disposable objects. Justin was about to learn that even someone floundering in mediocrity could fight back. And win. "This isn't just him being mean. This is criminal," I whispered to myself, staring at Justin's laptop screen. The encrypted emails I had decrypted slowly revealed a web of illegal activities that made my skin crawl. I quickly photographed the damning emails with my phone, my hands shaking. I had found everything from organ trafficking deals to bribery transactions. The charming surgeon was nothing more than a dangerous criminal. The front door opened and my heart skipped a beat. I slammed the laptop shut and shoved it back into its hiding place just as Justin walked into the room. "Eva," he called out, his voice unusually cheerful. "What's for dinner?" "I ordered takeout," I said, forcing a smile, trying to hide the adrenaline coursing through me. He looked at me suspiciously. "Why are you acting so weird?" "Weird," I echoed, my voice steady. "I'm just tired, Justin. It's been a long day." He eyed me for a moment before shrugging. "Whatever. Make sure you set the table." As I set the table, my mind raced. What would my next move be? But for now, I had to play it cool. I couldn't let him suspect a thing. Later that week, as Justin continued his usual night shifts, I became more meticulous in gathering evidence. I copied files, took photos of documents, and even recorded some of our conversations. The more I uncovered, the more revolted I felt. During one of our dinners, Justin dropped another bomb. "I've invited my parents over this weekend," he said casually between bites. "We'll have a little family gathering. You can show my mother how useful you can be by preparing everything." I bit back the resentful reply that bubbled up. "Sure, Justin, I'll take care of it." As the weekend approached, I prepared meticulously. But not just for the gathering. It was time to turn the tables. When his parents arrived, I greeted them warmly, my heart pounding with anticipation. Evelyn smiled and embraced me, but Richard's stern face showed he wasn't convinced by the domestic facade. The dinner conversation started light, filled with polite chit-chat. I served the meal, trying to time everything perfectly. My pulse quickened as the conversation shifted. "Justin, how's work been lately?" Richard asked, his tone neutral. "Busy as always, Dad," Justin replied, beaming with pride. "Saving lives every day." I almost choked on my drink. The hypocrisy was unbearable, but I held my tongue. I needed to wait for the perfect moment. As the evening wore on, Justin's arrogance grew. Finally, he made a comment that made my blood boil. "You know," he said, glancing at me, "it's hard to balance such an important career with someone who barely contributes." That was it. I couldn't take any more. "Actually, Justin," I said, my voice steady, "I think it's time your parents knew the whole truth." Evelyn looked alarmed, and Richard's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about, Eva?" Justin asked, his voice low and threatening. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. I found these on your laptop. Care to explain? His face paled as the images of the incriminating emails flashed on the screen. Evelyn gasped, covering her mouth, while Richard's face turned red with fury. What is this, Justin? Evelyn asked, her voice trembling. Justin stammered, trying to come up with a lie, but the evidence was overwhelming. It's not what it looks like, he pleaded. But the room had already turned against him. Richard stood up, his face stern. Is this true, Justin? Have you been involved in illegal activities? Justin's silence spoke volumes. Evelyn burst into tears, and Richard's eyes filled with disappointed anger. How could you? The confrontation had begun, and there was no turning back. I felt a surge of vindication, knowing that the truth was finally out in the open. Justin's world was about to crumble, and I was ready for the fallout. You think your title gives you power over me? Over anyone? I stated, my calm voice slicing through the tension-filled room like a knife. Justin's parents were still digesting the images on my phone. Evelyn's tear-streaked face looked shattered, while Richard appeared as if he might burst from anger. But none of that mattered now. Eva, you better watch your mouth, Justin snarled, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and rage. Enough is enough. Time to turn the tables, I said, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. You've treated me like dirt for too long, and now everyone will see who you really are. Justin lunged towards me, but Richard stepped in. You stay right where you are, he bellowed, his face inches from Justin's. Have you lost your mind, son? Dad, it's not what it looks like, Justin tried to explain, his voice lacking the confidence it usually held. He looked cornered like a trapped animal. Evelyn sobbed quietly, her body shaking. Justin, how could you? We raised you better than this. Justin's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. Eva, get out, now, he growled, trying to regain control. No, I replied firmly. I'm not leaving. You are the one who will face the consequences. Richard turned to me, his voice softer but firm. Eva, I'm sorry for what you've been through, but we need to get to the bottom of this. I nodded, taking a step back to let the conversation unfold. Justin's face looked strained, the facade of the charming doctor cracking at the edges. Justin, you must come clean, Richard insisted, his stern judicial tone leaving no room for debate. You don't understand, Dad, Justin said, floundering. I did it to help people. These organ trades saved lives. Evelyn gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Justin, that's illegal. You risked everything, everyone, for money? Justin's face flushed with a mix of anger and shame. It's not just about the money, Mom. It's complicated. Complicated? Evelyn cried out. This is criminal. The room grew silent for a moment, the weight of what had been said hanging in the air like a dark storm cloud. I couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction. Finally, Justin was facing the consequences for his actions. Richard shook his head, looking his son dead in the eye. You need to turn yourself in. It's the only way to atone for what you've done. Justin's face turned pale, and he took a step back. Dad, you can't be serious. I'm very serious, Richard said, his voice firm. If you don't, I will. Justin's eyes widened in desperation. He turned to me, his expression a mix of hatred and pleading. Eva, please, don't do this. I held my ground, meeting his gaze with unyielding resolve. This isn't about revenge anymore, Justin. This is about right and wrong. Evelyn stood and placed a hand on Justin's arm, tears streaming down her face. Justin, we love you, but you must take responsibility for your actions. Traitor, Justin's eyes screamed at me, but his lips remained pressed in a thin line. He turned towards his father, defeated. Fine, if that's what it takes. Richard pulled out his phone and dialed quickly, each number a final nail in the coffin of Justin's charade. I'm calling our attorney. We're going to sort this out legally. As Richard's voice echoed through the room, making arrangements, I felt a mixture of relief and dread. This was just the beginning, but at least the truth was out. I watched as Justin stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped. The man who had once controlled me was now facing the collapse of everything he held dear. For once, I felt hope for justice, for my mother, and for myself. My future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. I would not be a victim any longer. Is this true, Justin? Have you been trading lives for money? Evelyn's voice trembled with disbelief as she clutched her son's arm. The dining room felt like a courtroom, Justin stood there, cornered and pale, his eyes cast downward. "Mom, he stammered, searching for words that wouldn't come. The truth finally out in the open, I thought, feeling a surge of vindication. "It's all true," I stated, my voice clear. "Justin's been involved in illegal organ trafficking and bribery. I have all the evidence." Richard hung up the phone. "The attorney is on his way. Until then, Justin, you need to start explaining yourself." Justin flinched. "Dad, it's more complicated than you think. I didn't have a choice." "Choice? You always have a choice," Richard fired back, "and you chose crime." Evelyn sobbed quietly, holding her forehead. "This can't be happening. How could you do this to your patients, to us?" Justin clenched his fists, his facade of control entirely shattered. "It wasn't just for money," he said, his voice hollow. "Some of these people were desperate. Lives were saved." "And how many lives were ruined?" I retorted, locking eyes with him. "You think your good intentions justify breaking the law? Exploiting people?" Richard raised a hand. "Eva's right. Whatever your reasoning, it doesn't excuse this." Justin's gaze shifted around the room, looking for an ally, but finding none. "Dad, Mom, please, I can make this right. Just give me a chance." "No, Justin," Richard said quietly. "You must take responsibility for this. Our family name is at stake, and more importantly, you need to atone for your actions." A tense silence filled the room as Justin seemed to crumple under the weight of his father's words. It was strange seeing this once powerful man now cornered and vulnerable. The doorbell rang, breaking the silence. Richard glanced at me, nodding for confirmation. That must be the attorney. I opened the door to find not just the family attorney, but also a police officer standing beside him. Wordlessly, I stepped back to let them in. "Richard," the attorney said, shaking hands and nodding solemnly at Evelyn, "I've briefed the officer about the situation." Justin's eyes widened in panic. "Dad, you called the police?" "I had to," Richard said firmly, though his voice softened slightly. "It's the right thing to do." The officer stepped forward. "Justin Parker, you're under arrest for your involvement in illegal organ trafficking and bribery. You have the right to remain silent." Justin looked at his parents one last time, desperation in his eyes. "Please, help me." Evelyn's tears flowed freely, but she said nothing. Richard sighed deeply. "We'll get you a lawyer, Justin, but you must face the consequences." As the officer pulled out the handcuffs, Justin didn't resist. His eyes found mine, pleading silently, but I felt no pity. This was justice. "I'm done being your victim, Justin. Now, the world knows who you really are," I said quietly, feeling the weight of the last few months lift off my shoulders. As they led Justin away, Evelyn collapsed into Richard's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. He held her, his face a mix of heartbreak and resolve. "You did the right thing," Richard said, looking at me. "No one should have to live in fear or be treated like that. Thank you for your courage." I nodded, unable to form words. Justice was messy, and hearts were broken, but it was a necessary step. I had exposed the truth, and in doing so had freed myself from Justin's cruel grip. Outside, as the police car pulled away, I watched with a strange sense of peace. Justin had been powerful and ruthless, but now he was simply a man facing the consequences of his actions. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt free. The media frenzy hit like a hurricane the day after Justin's arrest. Reporters swarmed our apartment building, their cameras flashing as they peppered me with questions. "Eva, how long did you know? What did you uncover? How do you feel now that it's all out in the open?" "I'm done being your victim, Justin. Now the world knows who you really are," I had said, and it was now more true than ever. As I looked at the chaos around me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. Justice would be served, even if it was a messy process. A police officer managed to clear a path for me. "Eva Hall, Detective Mills would like to speak with you." "Thank you," I replied, following the officer to an unmarked car parked discreetly around the corner. Detective Sarah Mills was waiting inside, her expression unreadable. She motioned for me to sit. "Eva, I need to hear everything from the beginning. What you found, how you found it, all of it." I took a seat, my heart still pounding from the chaos outside. "I found Justin's emails," I began. He'd been encrypting messages about illegal organ trades and bribes. I took photos of everything. Detective Mills nodded. "We've reviewed the evidence you provided and begun our investigation. Thanks to you, we're already making progress on tracking down his accomplices." A A sense of relief washed over me. What happens now? Now we gather more evidence and prepare the case against him. It's going to be a long process, Eva. Are you ready for that? I took a deep breath. Yes, I'm ready. I've come this far. I won't back down now. Detective Mills smiled faintly. Good. You've done an incredible thing, Eva. Not many people would have had the courage to do what you did. I nodded, determined. Thank you, Detective. We spent the next few hours going over the details, piece by piece. It was exhausting, reliving each painful discovery, but I knew it was necessary. By the time we finished, the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the chaotic scene outside. Finally, outside, I glanced at the dispersing crowd of reporters, realizing it was time to reclaim my life. I walked back to our apartment, every step solidifying my resolve. That evening, I called my mom. Hey, Mom, it's over. Justin's been arrested. Her relief was palpable. I'm so proud of you, Eva. You've been so strong. I couldn't have done it without you, I said, my voice breaking a little. It's been hard, but it was worth it. Come home, sweetheart, she replied, her voice warm. We can start over together. I'll be there soon, Mom. As I packed up my belongings, the emptiness of the apartment struck me. This place, once filled with promise and love, now held only bitter memories and broken dreams. I had to leave it all behind to truly move forward. The next morning, I woke up early, the sun barely peeking over the horizon. I looked around the apartment one last time before stepping out the door with my bags. Outside, the air was crisp, and the world seemed strangely quiet, without the buzz of media frenzy. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. I'm done being your victim, Justin, I whispered to myself as I walked to my car. Now, it's time to live my life. As I drove away, the city skyline faded into the distance, along with the chaos that had consumed my life for so long. There was a long road ahead, full of uncertainty and challenges, but for the first time, I felt ready to face it. I arrived at my mom's place, a sense of peace filling me as she welcomed me with open arms. I hugged her tightly, knowing that together we could rebuild our lives. This was just the beginning. Justice had been served, and now it was time to find a new path, one filled with hope, strength, and a future I could finally control. Freedom tastes a little bittersweet, but it's mine, I thought, standing in the doorway of my mother's house. A wave of calm washed over me, something I hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. Eva, come inside, Mom called, her voice warm and comforting. Dinner's almost ready. Walking into the kitchen, I was struck by how different this felt compared to the cold, tense atmosphere of the apartment I had shared with Justin. Here, everything smelled of home, of safety and love. How are you holding up? Mom asked, setting a pot of soup on the table. Better, I said, helping her set the table. It's strange, but I feel like I can breathe again. She smiled, wrapping me in a hug. We'll get through this together. I felt a sudden swell of gratitude for her support. Thanks, Mom, for everything. Over the next few weeks, life began to take on a new rhythm. I found part-time work at a local cafe, much less stressful than the multiple jobs I juggled before. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and allowed me to care for Mom. One afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Evelyn. Eva, I wanted to apologize for everything. We had no idea what Justin was capable of. Thank you, Evelyn, I replied, surprised by her call. I'm just glad the truth is finally out. We'd like to help if you'll let us, she continued. Financially, emotionally, whatever you need. I hesitated. Accepting their help felt complicated, yet I knew it would make things easier. I appreciate it. Let's take it one step at a time. Days turned into weeks, and I visited Justin's parents occasionally. Despite everything, they offered genuine support, wanting to right the wrongs their son had committed. Evelyn even helped care for Mom sometimes, her presence a comfort we hadn't expected. One evening, Richard showed up with a somber expression. Eva, I wanted to tell you that we've arranged a fund for you and Sharon. It's the least we can do. Tears welled up in my eyes. This gesture overwhelmed me. Thank you, Richard. This means more than you know. He nodded, his face reflecting the weight of his own family's crisis. We owe it to you. Despite the challenges, a sense of justice and closure began to fill the void left by Justin's abuse. With each contribution from Evelyn and Richard, our lives became a little less burdened. It was a strange alliance forged out of mutual tragedy and need for forgiveness. One night, as I tucked Mom into bed, she grabbed my hand. I'm so proud of you, Eva. You've done so much for us. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. Thanks, Mom. I just want us to be happy. The news covered Justin's court trial extensively. Watching from our living room, I saw him being sentenced. There he was, the man who had tried to tear me down, now paying for his crimes. Freedom indeed tasted bittersweet, but justice was powerful. As days turned into months, I found strength I never knew I had. My job at the cafe became more stable, providing a steady income that allowed me more time with Mom. Her health remained fragile, but our bond grew deeper every day. Evelyn and Richard's continued support transformed from financial help to genuine friendship. We had become unlikely allies in the aftermath of a shared catastrophe. One weekend, as I sat with Mom on the porch, enjoying the cool breeze, she looked at me with a smile. "What do you see for your future, Eva?" I paused, considering her question. "I'm not sure yet, but for now I see us together, happy and free from the past." She nodded, her eyes reflecting pride. "That sounds just right to me." As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I felt a renewed sense of hope. The broken promise from my past had led me to a new beginning, one filled with resilience, determination, and love. And for the first time, I could truly see a brighter future, a future that was mine to build, step by step.